Hands-on Apologetics, and we're going to talk about a very important issue indeed. It's about the Eucharist. You can't get more important than that. And specifically, Eucharistic miracles in the modern age, where we have at our disposal scientific means to look deeper into the mystery of many of these Eucharistic miracles. And there's a fantastic book that came out. It's called A Cardiologist Examines Jesus, the stunning science behind Eucharistic miracles. And it's put out by Dr. Franco Serafini. And with us is Kristen Van Uden, who received her M.A. in history from the College of William and Mary in 2019. She previously studied the persecution of Catholics under communist regime, which actually would be great to have on the show just to talk about that. She now researches contemporary Catholic saints and miracles as an author and spokesman for Sophia Institute Press. And she is honored to serve as a spokesperson for Dr. Franco Serafini and his fantastic book, A Cardiologist Examines Jesus. And Kristen Van Uden, welcome to Hands-on Apologetics.
Hi, Gary. Thanks so much for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Now, did I get your last name right? Because there's a couple ways it could be pronounced.
Yes, very close. It's actually Van Uden, but we pronounced it wrong. It's kind of the Americanized pronunciation. So you are closer to the Dutch original, so good work with that.
I accidentally got it right for a change. Yeah, so what a fantastic book. Maybe we could start off by talking a little bit about the author, Dr. Franco Serafini. What's his background and what led him to write this book?
Sure. So Dr. Serafini has been a practicing cardiologist for decades, and he was also raised Catholic and has always been a very devout Catholic. So as a cardiologist, when he heard of these very contemporary miracles where the Eucharist, as we know, is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, but was manifesting in these miracles as actual heart tissue that was observable to the human eye and under a microscope, he kind of just had to investigate because he had the expertise. He knew what he was looking at, and he decided to investigate 5 such examples from 1992 in Buenos Aires all the way through 2013 in Poland. He traveled to these sites of the miracles and worked with the scientific teams that had initially investigated them, looked at whatever evidence remained in cases where that was possible, and then read just the scientific literature and the findings of these teams and came to the same conclusions with all of them, which are pretty stunning, which is that this, in each of these cases, was observed heart tissue that was suffering heart tissue and aligns with everything we know from the Gospels about Christ's life, death, and resurrection.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so so he was a cardiologist that, of course, since these miracles display that their cardiac tissue, I mean, that really is his field of expertise. So he was able to actually go on site, check with medical teams, even look at evidence. This is just fascinating because the first miracle he examines was actually one that I think our listeners are probably most familiar with. I can tell you, I wasn't familiar with all the rest, so this is a learning curve for me. But why don't we start there with the Eucharistic miracle of Lyciano?
Yes, so that is one of the oldest Eucharistic miracles documented. It occurred in the 8th century in Lyciano, Italy. And the amazing thing is that this material evidence of this miracle still exists. So Dr. Serafini was actually able to speak to the people who investigated and did medical tests on this back, as late as 1981. So this flesh has survived since the 8th century in order to be scientifically investigated with all of the newest technology in the 20th century. So that's a miracle in and of itself. Plus, if we didn't know what it was. And so the story with that miracle is that historically, and we'll see this in the modern cases as well, Eucharistic miracles have been prompted either by great belief, but more often by great doubt among the faithful. In this case in Lyciano, it was the priest himself who was having doubts about the real presence. And at the moment of consecration, when he pronounced the words of transubstantiation over the bread and wine, that is when the miracle occurred, where the veil was kind of broken. So instead of being under the appearances of bread, Jesus manifested himself as the heart tissue right there at the moment of the transubstantiation. So this priest obviously regained his faith after this happened. And we'll see when we start to ask the questions, why do we have these Eucharistic miracles in these certain places and times? It's often to bolster belief among kind of failing faith or more weakened faith in certain areas. So with that particular miracle, what Dr. Serafini found by speaking to these scientists after the fact was that it was quite consistent with all of the other miracles that have occurred even up until as late as 2013. So a couple of the just scientific characteristics of this heart tissue was that, number one, type AB blood was found, which we have found not only in the other miracles, but also is consistent with what's found on the Shroud of Turin. So I know one of the major criticisms from skeptics is, like in the medieval days, we don't know how they were collecting this evidence, so it could have been faked, it could have been a fraud, but it's quite impossible. And Dr. Serafini even says it would be more of a miracle for someone to have deduced what blood types were in the medieval period than it would have been to just believe what we're seeing with our own eyes, which is a supernatural occurrence.
Right. So in other words, there would have to be engineering that would have been beyond their ability at that time to reproduce the same blood types all over the place with different fraudulent miracles. Okay.
Exactly,
Very good.
And especially because AB blood type is the most rare. And in one of the later investigations, a scientist further pinned it down to be AB-RH negative, which is actually only shared by 0.75% of the population globally. So it would have been really impossible to even know that, never mind reproduce it.
Right. Yeah. Very good. So he looked over the report, and actually there was a couple reports, and that's one thing I really enjoyed about this book was Dr. Serafini. He's looking at it with a critical eye. So not all of the things that are in the records, he accepts. There are some things that he'll say the evidence is weak here, or maybe there's things that we shouldn't even consider because it's just too weak.
Correct, and I really like that as well. He's truly employing the scientific method of positing a hypothesis and then having the courage to face what the answers are, even if they're not what we're expecting. One of the issues that he faces, particularly in Lyciano, because it was so long ago, is the possibility of contamination by other either DNA or just being handled throughout the ages. So that's one of the when he analyzes the total amount of DNA that's found in each of the miracles, actually his conclusion is that it is inconclusive. And there is some, it seems, not tampering, but some, DNA from the scientists and from those who kept the miracle and kept the relic throughout the years. And so he's very honest about these things, but ultimately his conclusion is that, of course, this is real. This is what it purports to be. And he's placed this critical eye on it so that we may believe. Of course, the Gospels tell us, blessed are those who have not seen but yet have still believed. And Dr. Serafini fully believes that, but it's also just an amazing bolster to faith and to confound the realists that what we find is in fact consistent with what we believed already. Yeah, absolutely. And if someone's going to be able to identify cardiac tissue, it would be a cardiologist. And so, he basically concurs with what was found, I think it was 1971,